by committee meeting. Call it to order. This is a meeting of the Littlestown Area Board of School Directors. It is a live, in-person meeting open to the public in accordance with the Sunshine Act. By participating in this meeting, you are consenting to the recording, retention, and future viewing of this meeting. Carrie, could you please call the roll?
Brian Boyer.
Here.
Steve Ewan. Here. Nick Lovell.
Here.
Stephen Yurley.
Here. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance and moment of silence. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We now recognize members of the public who have signed up to provide comment as stipulated in policy 903. When your name is called, please approach the podium and state your name, confirm that you are a resident or taxpayer in the district and topic of discussion for the day. Please direct your comments to the board as a whole and not an individual. We ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. The privilege to speak may be interrupted, revoked, or recessed, and the meeting may be called by the chair if the speaker does not observe reasonable decorum and/or orderly conduct. Thank you. Wayne
Good evening, Board. Dwayne Sullivan, resident and a taxpayer of the district. I'm here tonight as that. I want to discuss the money that's being reported as an excess of $3.75 million. Now, I will tell you, I had this discussion months ago when the board wanted to raise taxes. I said we didn't need to raise taxes, and it turns out that I was correct. You have $180,000 you said you needed for ACTI, but you seem to have tentatively, depending on the audit, $3.75 million surplus from last year. So that would be like 21 times 180,000. So I think we had more than enough to cover ACTI. I've noticed you're moving money around. The middle school, high school revenue, money being moved around. The unassigned fund, technology, health reserve, transportation reserve, and of course you're moving around some of the $3.745 million into the capital reserve. My suggestion would be, since the residents of this town are hurting pretty bad, I talked to a lot of them today when they came to vote, and none of them had pitchforks for me. Just want to let y'all know that. But they are pretty disenchanted with a lot of you on this board. And I won't go into any names, but I will tell you they were not happy with you all. And none of them were not happy, say they were unhappy with what I was doing. As a matter of fact, I got accolades for actually standing up for them. So I will tell you that I visited a lot, also a lot of people, just like I did when I door knocked in 2023, which none of you did. I got the same reception from these people. And so I just wanted to report that I'm just not happy with it, with what you had reported. I had asked about that in June, about the money moving to capital projects. I was told that, oh, it's just a place. Well, no, it's not. We got $3.75 million we're going to move. So, and on top of that, we raised taxes the year before last at 2.75%. We rolled in a little over $500,000, and now we put that in the high school, middle school fund over there, and now we're taking it back out. So, I mean, we're just moving money around. That's all we're doing here. Just follow the money. As far as I'm concerned, it's not a good thing that we're deceiving the public. I say that because I'm reading the actual charts. So that's all I really have to say tonight, and I thank the board for listening to me. I just wanted to get up here and let you all know that as a taxpayer and a resident, I have great concerns over the way you all are handling the money in this district. And thank you for letting me speak tonight.
Thank you. Suzanne Johnson.
you all know, my name is Suzanne Johnson. I'm a district parent, resident, taxpayer, and voter. I'm personally vested and passionate about tonight's agenda items. This is perhaps one of the most revealing school board meetings of the year. And the irony of it being election day isn't lost on me. Last December, we had a new interim superintendent and 7 new board members were seated, which brought all kinds of chaos, but not positive change for our children's education or the taxpayers. Tonight, the committee will be discussing how to reallocate over $500,000 from the middle school, high school reserve and allocate a $3.75 million surplus from last year's budget. The public may be surprised to hear this because when the budget was approved in June 2023, we were told there was a $1.2 million deficit and that you needed to raise our taxes 2.75% to cover operating expenses and put almost $500,000 into that same building project fund. Voters should be asking, why did the district tell us they needed to raise our taxes last year to put money into the building project and now you're proposing to move money back out of that same fund? And why did you raise taxes when there wasn't a deficit? There was actually a $4.1 million budget surplus for FY23 and a $3.7 million budget surplus this year for FY24. So in my opinion, it appears that you tell us there will be a deficit when you're planning your budget to justify raising taxes so that there will then be a surplus, amazingly, to put that back into capital reserves in order to fund additional spending on district infrastructure. Why doesn't the district build a balanced budget like our Littlestown borough does that includes specifying a budgeted amount for infrastructure to be more transparent instead of shuffling money around after the fact? It is the school board's responsibility to hold the administration accountable for being more transparent and fiscally responsible. And in my opinion, y'all are failing. So are you going to allocate your surplus to paying down the district's bond debt for all those building projects? No. For the $3.7 million budget surplus, the proposal to allocate $3.2 million to capital reserves and the rest to a new transportation reserve. In addition, the proposal is to reallocate the $500,000 from the building projects to, so that we'll have a total of $600,000 set aside for new buses and vans, not for, student programming. $300,000 more for employee health care reserve, $100,000 more for the technology reserve, and $83,000 for the unassigned fund. When the FY25 budget was approved in June, we were told that there would be another deficit and that you needed to cut mental health resources and raise our taxes 1% again. However, in August, Dr. Bell said there was wiggle room in the budgeted expenses to pay for the new teaching assistant positions. With a $3.7 million surplus, that's about 10% wiggle room in last year's budgeted expenses. If that's true for FY25, then should we expect to see another $4 million surplus? And what happens in FY26 when the building project is complete and there's $6 million to move out of the reserve? Will that go down to paying down the district debt? Will that also be moved to capital expenditures for more infrastructure spending? When the board approved the FY25 budget, they also approved writing a blank check back in June 2024 to allocate the anticipated FY24 budget surplus in November, pending audit. At that time, we were over 90% through FY24, and Dr. Bell told the Gettysburg Times, quote, "We are almost to the penny on our revenues for the 2023-2024 school year, and it is plain to see we will come in several $1 million under budget on the expense side." So voters need to be asking each school board member, why didn't you stand up for the taxpayers when people were insisting that taxes supposedly had to be raised so that you could put $180,000 in ACTI, when you knew that the district would have ample funds to cover that from the fiscal year 24 budget surplus of several $1 million, 3.75 exactly, plus $725,000 for finalizing land sales this year. There were only 2 board members that consistently voted against new spending and the budget budget increase. One resigned last month, and the other has come under fire from the rest of this board. Unfortunately, the very important questions I've asked tonight will likely be ignored by the board, as usual, and there will be additional accusations of misinformation. But all the facts came from the documents attached to tonight's agenda or the official minutes from prior meetings. I want to remind you all that next year, the terms end for 4 of the 5 school board members that voted for this year's unnecessary tax increase, and the newly appointed replacement for last month's resignation. I pray that the voters are better informed and elect people that will actually bring positive change to improve the fiscal responsibility, increase transparency, and improve student outcomes for this district.
Thank you. All right, can we move on to the presentation?
All right, so the presentation today is going to cover several topics that we covered last month at the FP&S committee meeting. The two that are going to be the topic are capital projects in athletics and facility grant. And then we're going to touch base back on to, we're going to touch on allocation of funds and fund balance, pending the audit, and then move back into staff. So we'll go into the first one here, which is the athletics. So the big thing to note is that the FPS committee decided to not move forward on renovating the practice fields, but did move forward on relocating or reorienting the softball field. So with that, talking with Turf Track and Field, who did the feasibility study, part of the design process is there's a fee involved with designing baseball, softball, and the stadium scoreboard. And there's also contingency you have to add on from their original feasibility study. So that's what I worked with Turf Track and Field with Victor. So their design fee, if we pursue them, is 4%, and contingency estimate is 15%, and that would cover just for unforeseen items such as that utility relocation we talked about, or any other unforeseen items. The biggest change with the softball orientation change is when we reoriented it, it moved it to the side a little bit, which would then have to replace the dugouts, and we'd have to relocate the batting cages. The positive side with reorienting the softball field is there's a parking lot proposed. They could add additional parking, which would then actually have even more parking available within the reoriented scope. So that could free up some extra parking spaces when we reorient it versus keeping it at original location. So these numbers are updated with the estimated 4% design fee and 15% contingency. So if the committee is in agreement, I'll ask them to see if we want to move this forward with a contract for design phase. Victor and I to do that, and we would have that approval on November 3rd.
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I thought we decided not to do any of this while the building project was going on, because we didn't make it part of the building project.
The athletics,
Yeah.
the most recent committees for FP&S has put it back on the table to pursue and design based off the feasibility study.
Yeah, but you also got ACTI we have to look into. I mean, we've got a lot of things on the table, and to do this right now doesn't make sense to me.
And that's why the ask is to move, if we're going to move forward, there's going to be a cost to move forward. So if we're going to do that, it's going to be time and effort and cost from a design standpoint to do that. So it's going to be myself and Victor and Shelley as the athletic director to work with the design company to have designs and show the full board at some point. So that's kind of the ask. If we're willing to go forward to the next steps, now that we have updated costs in front of the committee.
So, Brian, do you have any thoughts?
I'm fine with going forward.
Part of, I mean, just to catch your view, part of the funds that we're going to keep is the land sale. So that's one-time money that,
Yeah, but you haven't sold the land yet. I thought the other one, I thought the other one was one that's sold.
I do, with the, are these just estimates?
So the 4% would be a hard percentage. So the way the design fees, the 4% set up is they would estimate the design fee based off of this 684, and then we would have to go out to bid post-design. And if the bid came in below this, they would restructure their percentage and refund us back money. Or if it came in higher, and we considered to go for the same thing we went with this project, our design fee from RLPS Architects was based off of an estimated number until the bid became an official number, and then they reset and reallocated.
So this won't be the final.
And, yeah, and the same thing with the contingency, if we don't run into any unforeseen hiccups, this could be $0, or it could be as much as 15% estimation. The same thing we're doing with the project. So like when Gil updates the board on change orders, that's the contingency fee. So that's what this would be. So unforeseen stuff that we dig, we don't see, that we have to add, that would be that 3%. So these numbers are what we would say is more or less a ceiling, and it can come anywhere below that.
So, Jeannie, you had a comment?
I just think we've got a lot going on, we've got to decide this, I understand the land sale, but we have a lot going on. It's the same thing I said when I was on board before. I mean, it's a lot of money after.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand why we have to do all this at the same time.
We haven't done anything for 40 years.
I know, but then we would have
50
put it in
years.
the building project.
No, we wouldn't. We were lucky to get the building project passed the way it was. The whole board was replaced
Right, and
because
it
we
just
passed the
started
building
last year,
project.
now you're bringing this up 1 year later? If we couldn't do it a year ago, why can we suddenly do it now?
We didn't do it as a building project. One was this part didn't come up. Remember that. I don't remember the 17th part of the building project.
Athletics were kept out in store because of the cost of the additional cost, which was much greater than what we see here, and with the construction
Right.
project. And
Because I remember, so we even pared down the gymnasium because at the beginning of that whole thing, we were going to put a full gymnasium on, which we should have done.
Right, that's what I'm saying. If we
Because-
couldn't do it a year ago, why?
Well, we couldn't do it a year ago because the people on the board wouldn't vote for it. They tried to pare it down because they were afraid to get voted off. Well, they got voted off anyway. But I'm glad we did the building project because it was needed.
Right, but
Sometimes
what
you have to have the
I
courage to
understand
do the things that
but
need to
what
be
are you
done.
gonna- What are you going to
Okay.
say when we start talking about ACTI?
Okay, so we're trying to.
Same thing. We're the only county in the state of Pennsylvania without a tech school.
I understand
The
that.
only county. And
Okay,
because
all right,
for 50
We're not
years.
talking about ETCI right now.
Yeah, I
You
know,
have to have
but-
So we
priorities.
need to get back to focus on what we're doing here.
Listen, you can't just,
So-
you can't just spend money on anything you want.
So Jeannie, I understand what you're saying.
So do I.
I hear you loud and clear.
Me too.
And it's an important aspect to be able to afford and budget and make it so you can move your projects forward. I understand that. But we need to stay focused on what we're doing here, okay? And so, you know, Brian, you had your comment. Nick, you have a comment? Anything else to add?
And we did cut about half of
We
the
did.
total project last
We
year.
did, just like we cut the building.
Okay,
So
so,
I would say I'm okay with moving to the next step.
okay. So we can move it to the next step. If we decide to do that, then we can allow the full board to weigh in and say, hey, you know, this is, we want to do this, or we don't want to do this. But at this point in time, I think it's probably needs to go for the full board, so.
All right, so we'll see that contract, and we can have any further discussion at the work session next Monday. All right, so we're going to jump into.
Wait a minute, you're not going to do the contract before the work session, right?
No, we'll have a new discussion. It'll be available for viewing. Yep. Yeah, we wouldn't execute it until post-voting session. The next thing is we had some significant information with the public school facility grant. As I alluded to last month that we were hearing was that they were going to significantly cut or supplement funding, reduce funding. We unfortunately were one of the school districts that got reduced funding. We are more than fortunate enough that we got $500,000 for each of our submissions, so it was competitive. There were a little over 300 applications that were submitted for about $840 million. I believe 200 and some change were approved for the total amount of $175 million, which is what that appropriations were for. From that, Littlestown was awarded about $1 million, $500,000 each. So we'll go through. I will note that last month, I pulled old records for the school facility improvement grants. So we're reviewing my notes again to update on the board. That's why if you notice these numbers might be changed from last month. So the blue gym HVAC is $845. This was at the top, I'll say, was our original submission with the grants. So $845 for blue gym, 1990 windows, $196,000, and then HVAC and pneumatic upgrade in the lower level, which would be like the shop areas, and the high school was $2.3 million. And then we get grant funding of $500,000, which originally we thought was going to be 75%. It's 15% of what we submitted. So that's a significant decrease. So the total project less the grant funding would be $2.9 million. And then ACES, what we submitted was an HVAC replacement for end of life for this original HVAC units here, $1.6 million, and a roof coating for $1.2 million, and then less than $500,000, which is 17% rather than the 75%, which is 2.4. So what that task Victor and I had to do was to look at how we could scale or reduce